krásný páteční večer. Dnes opět mám nachystané čtení a nebude to zas tak poučné jako v předchozích týdnech, ale dnes bych vám prostě ráda přečetla krásnou povídku od autorky, která se jmenuje Djuna Barnesová, která se narodila roku 1892 a zemřela 1982 a jedná se o americkou modernistickou autorku, která tedy psala převážně prózu, povídky a také romány a jako jedna z těch modernistických autorek není tak známá, musím říct, že například třeba Virginia Woolfová určitě je daleko slavnější a Djuna Barnes byla literárními kritiky objevena nebo znovu objevena až relativně nedávno jako jedna z těch trošku upozaděných autorek, což je velmi dobře, protože ta její próza je velmi zajímavá. Mimochodem byla to jedna opět z těch autorek, která byla součástí takové té první vlny feminismu, takže byla feministka, zajímala se i nejen o heterosexuální vztahy, ale i o homosexuální vztahy a konkrétně vztahy mezi ženami. Byla to novinářka, ilustrátorka, žila nějakou dobu, jednak tedy většinu života prožila v New Yorku, ale pobývala převážně ve 20. letech také v Paříži, kde po první světové válce se vlastně usadila taková ta modernistická avantgarda jako Hemingway, Fitzgerald a podobně. A taky prožila, takže tam relativně svobodně psala a získala si spoustu uměleckých literárních kontaktů a pobývala také nějaký čas v Severní Americe. Jak jsem řekla, je to autorka, která zase dnes nebo v dnešní době je poměrně populární, ale nebylo to tak. A já jsem si pro své čtení dnes připravila povídku, která se jmenuje A Night Among the Horses. Takže noc strávená mezi koňmi. A jenom krátce shrnu, o co v té povídce půjde, abyste věděli, na co se zaměřit. Tak je to povídka o muži, který se patrně hodlá oženit s jednou ženou, která bude vystupovat v té povídce, ale jeho velká vášeň jsou koně. On se stará o koně, snaží se s nimi být každý den, má k ním opravdu velmi vřelý, hluboký vztah, více než k té ženě, bohužel, protože mu ty koně připadají jako taková čistá zvířata, nebo čisté bytosti, se kterými si rozumí daleko více než s lidmi. A ke konci vlastně povídky, čím dál více tíhne spíš k té přírodě, k těm koním, než k té jeho snoubence. A závěr nebudu prozrazovat, uvidíte sami. Doufám, že se vám bude líbit a dávejte pozor, nebo všímejte si hlavně toho, jak autorka vyjadřuje ten vztah toho hlavního hrdiny s tou přírodou, protože někdy se opravdu zdá, že ten hrdina je součástí té přírody, ne že on a někde nějaká příroda, ale že jeho tělo opravdu zapadá do toho přírodního prostředí a je jakousi extenzí té přírody. Takže toho si prosím všimněte a doufám, že se vám povídka bude líbit. Takže já začnu číst. Toward dusk, in the summer of the year, a man in evening dress carrying a top hat and a cane crept on hands and knees through the underbrush bordering the pastures of the Buckler estate. His wrist hurt him from holding his weight, and he sat down. Sticky ground vines fanned out all about him. They climbed the trees, the posts of the fence. They were everywhere. He peered through the thickly tangled branches and saw, standing against the darkness, a grove of white birch shimmering like teeth in a skull. He could hear the gate grating on its hinge as the wind clapped. His heart moved with the movement of the earth. A frog puffed forth its croaking, immemorized right cry. The man struggled for breath. The air was heavy and hot. He was nested in astonishment. He wanted to drowse off. Instead, he placed his hat and cane beside him, straightening his coat-tails, lying out on his back, waiting. Something quick was moving the ground. It began to shake with sudden warning, and he wondered if it was his heart. A lamp in the far-away window winked as the boughs swung against the wind. The odor of crushed grasses, mingling with the faint, reassuring smell of dung, fanned up and drawled off to the north. He opened his mouth, drawing in the ends of his moustache. The tremor lengthened, it ran beneath his body and tumbled away into the earth. He sat upright, putting on his hat. He braced his cane against the ground between his outthrust leg. Now he not only felt the trembling of the earth, but caught the muffled horny sound of hoofs smacking the turf as a friend strikes the back of a friend, hard but without malice. They were on the near side now as they took the curve of the willow road. He pressed his forehead against the bars of the fence. The soft, menacing sound deepened as heat deepens. The horses, head-on, roared by him, their legs rising and falling like savage needles taking purposeless stitches. He saw their bellies pitching from side to side, wrecking the bars of the fence as they swung past. On his side of the barrier he rose up, running, following, gasping. His foot caught in the trailing pine and he pitched forward, striking his head on a stump as he went down. Blood trickled from his scalp. Like a red mane it ran into his eyes and he stroked it back with the knuckles of his hand. As he put on his hat, in this position the pounding hoofs shook him like a child on a knee. Presently he searched for his cane. He found it snared in the fern. A wax Patrick pipe brushed against his cheek. He ran his tongue over it, snapping it in two. Move as he would, the grass was always under him, crackling with twigs and cones. An acorn fell out of the soft dropping powders of the wood. He took it up, and as he held it between finger and thumb, his mind raced over the scene back there with the mistress of the house. For what else could one call Freda Buckler but the mistress of the house? That small, fiery woman with a battery for a heart and the body of a toy, who ran everything, who purred, saturated with impudence, with a mechanical buzz that ticked away her humanity. He blew down his moustache. Freda, with that aggravating, floating yellow veil. He told her it was aggravating. He told her that it was shameless and stood for nothing but temptation. He puffed out his cheeks, blowing at her as she passed. She laughed, stroking his arm, throwing her head back, her nostrils scarlet to the pit. They had ended by riding out together, a boot's length apart, she no bigger than a bee on a bonnet. In complete misery, he had dug down on his spurs, and she, "Gently, John, gently," showing the edges of her teeth in the white distilling mouth. "You can't be ostler all your life. Horses," she snorted. "I like horses, but..." He had lowered his crop. "There are other things. You simply can't go on being a groom forever, not with a waist like that, and you know it. I will make a gentleman out of you. I will step you up from being a thing. You will see, you will enjoy it. He had leaned over and lashed at her boot with his whip. It caught her at the knee, the foot flew up in its stirrup, and as though she were dancing. And the little beast was delighted. They trotted on away, and they trotted back. He helped her to dismount, and she sailed off, trailing the yellow veil, crying back, "You will love it." Before they had gone on like this for more than a month, bowling each other over in the spirit, ringing each other this way and that, hunter and hunted, it had become a game without any pleasure. Debased lady, debased ostler, on the wings of vertigo. What was she getting him into? He shouted, bold, cracked whip. What did she figure she wanted? The kind of woman who can't tell the truth. Truth ran out and away from her as though her veins were pipettes stuck in by the devil. And drinking he swelled, and pride had him. It floated him off. He saw her standing behind him in every mirror. She followed him from showpiece to showpiece. She fell in beside him, walked him hand under elbow. You will rise to Governor General. Well, to Inspector. Inspector, as you like, say Master of the Regiment. Say cavalry officer, horses too, leather, whips. Oh my God, she almost whined as she circled on her heels. With a broad, flat, noble chest, she said, "You will be a pavement of honors. Mass yourself. You will leave affliction." "Stop it," he shouted. "I like being common. With a quick waist like that, the horns will miss you." What horns? The dilemma. "I could stop you all over if I wanted to." She was amused. "Men in a corner," she said. She tormented him. She knew it. She tormented him with her objects of culture. One knee on an ottoman, she would hold up and out the most delicate miniature, ivories cupped in her palm, tilting them from the sun, saying, "But look, look." He put his hands behind his back. She aborted that. She asked him to hold ancient missals, volumes of fairy tales, all with handsome tooling, all bound in corded russet. She spread maps, and with a long hatpin dragging across mountains and ditches pointed to just where she had been. Like a dry snail the point wandered the coast, when abruptly, sticking the steel in, she cried, "Borgia!" and stood there, jangling a circle of ancient keys. His anxiety increased with curiosity. If he married her, after he had married her, what then? Where would he be after he had satisfied her crazy whim? What would she make of him in the end? In short, what would she leave of him? Nothing, absolutely nothing, not even his horses. Here would be a damned fool for you. He wouldn't fit in anywhere after Freda. He would be neither what he was nor what he had been. He would be a thing, half standing, half crouching, like those figures under the roof of historic buildings, the hard position of the damned. He had looked at her often without seeing her. After a while, he began to look at her with great attention. Well, well, really a small mousy woman, with fair pretty hair that fell like an insect's feelers into the nape of her neck, moving when the wind moved. She darted and bobbled about too much, and always with the mindless intensity of a mechanical toy kicking and raking about the floor. And she was always a step or two ahead of him, or stroking his arm at arm's length, or she came at him in a gust, leaning her sharp little chin on his shoulder, floating away slowly, only to be stumbled over when he turned. Oh, this particular day he had caught her by the wrist, slewing her around. This once, he thought to himself, this once I will ask her straight out for truth. A direct shot might dislodge her. Miss Freda, just a moment. You know I haven't a friend in the world. You know positively that I haven't a person to whom I can go and get an answer to any question of any sort. So then, just what do you want me for? She blushed to the roots of her hair. Girlish. Are you going to be girlish? She looked as if she were going to scream. Her whole frame buzzed, but she controlled herself and drawled with lavish calm. Don't be nervous. Be patient. You will get used to everything. You will even like it. There's nothing so enjoying as climbing. And then everything will slide away, stable and all. She caught the wings of her nose in the pinching folds of a lace handkerchief. Isn't that the destination? The worst of all had been the last night, the evening of the masked ball. She had insisted on his presence. Come, she said, just as you are, and be our whipper-in. That was the final blow, the unpardonable insult. He had obeyed, except that he did not come just as he was. He made an elaborate toilet. He dressed for evening like any ordinary gentleman. He was the only person present, therefore, who was not in dress, that is, in the accepted sense. On arrival, he found most of the guests tipsy. Before long, he himself was more than a little drunk and horrified to find that he was dancing a minuet. Stately, slow, with a great soft puff pace of a woman, showered with sequins, grunting in cascades of plaited towel. Out of this embrace he extricated himself, slipping off the bare spots of the rosin-powdered floor, to find Freda coming at him with a tiny glass of cordial which she poured into his open mouth. At that point he was aware that he had been gasping for air. He came to a sudden stop. He took in the whole room with his frantic glance. There in the corner sat Freda, mother with her cats. She always sat, Freda's mother with her cats. She always sat in corners, and she always sat with cats. And there was the rest of the cast, cousins, nephews, uncles, aunts. The next moment, the Calliard. Freda, arms up, hands palm out, elbows buckled in at the breast. A praying mantis was all but tooth to tooth with him. Wait! He stepped free, and with the knob end of his cane he drew a circle in the rosin clear around her, then backward went through the French windows. He knew nothing after that until he found himself in the shrubbery, sighing, his face close to the fence, peering in. He was with his horses again. He was where he belonged again. He could hear them tearing up the sod, galloping about as though in their own ballroom, and oddest of all at this dark time of the night. He began drawing himself under the lowest bar, throwing his hat and cane in before him, panting as he crawled. The black stallion was now in the lead. The horses were taking the curve in the willow road that ran into the further pasture, and through the dust they looked faint and enormous. On the top of the hill, 4 had drawn apart and were standing, testing the weather. He would catch one, mount one, he would escape. He was no longer afraid. He stood up, waving his hat and cane and shouting. They did not seem to know him, and they swerved past him and away. He stared after them, almost crying. He did not think of his dress, the white shirt front, the top hat, the waving stick, his abrupt rising out of the dark, their excitement. Surely they must know him in a moment. Wheeling, manes up, nostrils flaring, blasting out steam as they came on, they passed him in a whinnying flood, and he damned them in horror. But what he shouted was bitch, and found himself swallowing fire from his heart, lying on his face, sobbing. I can do it. Damn everything. I can get on with it. I can make my mark. The upraised hoofs of the first horse missed him. The second did not. Presently, the horses drew apart, nibbling and swishing their tails, avoiding a patch of tall grass. Tak, to byl konec povídky, poměrně slušný, poměrně smutný. Pokud jste se dostali nebo doposlouchali až do konce této povídky, tak jste si všimli, že je opravdu taková velmi temná, hodně existenciální. Je to vlastně, ten hrdina se ptá v podstatě sám sebe, co má udělat, jestli se stát manželem oné ženy, která z něho chce udělat věc, jak sám vyjadřuje, anebo dále užívat své svobody, které se avšak, jak jsme viděli na konci, kdy ho kopyty srazil kůň, tak které svobody se vlastně vůbec nakonec nedočkal. Doufám, že jste stihli při tom mém čtení si opravdu povšimnout, jak on je součástí té dané přírody, jak je součástí například trávy nebo té dané krajiny. Já zkusím tady najít ještě nějaký příklad, ale nevím, jestli se mi to teď úplně podaří. Teď asi úplně to nevidím. Ne, teď nemůžu najít tu přímou citaci, ale důležité je, že opravdu on si myslel, že ta jeho budoucí manželka, nebo žena, která si ho chce vzít, ho opravdu chce přetvořit v něco umělého, něco nepřirozeného, a když si ji tedy vezme, tak on tu svou svobodu, nespoutanost naprosto ztratí, protože jeho manželka už nebude chtít, aby byl součást přírody, ale součást kultury a nějakých společenských konvencí, které on moc neuznává. Když budete chtít, napište pod toto video a ráda vám pošlu povídku například oskenovanou, abyste si ji mohli v klidu sami přečíst, a budu ráda, když například mi napíšete i komentář, jak se vám ta povídka líbila. To je v pátek večer vše, přeji vám krásný víkend a budu se těšit opět v pátek.